Hey folks, Coach Josh Wood here in Hobart, Tasmania. Now, we've just done a segment on footwear and what you need to look for, and whether you need high tops or low tops, trail runners, mountain boots, all the things around that, how to take care of them, and that naturally leads into a discussion on blisters. So it's one of the big questions that we get and one of the things that really needs to be looked at. So let's break down, first of all, what causes blisters. And the easiest answer is essentially friction. Friction causes blisters. Now, everything that we do with blister control comes down to how do we prevent friction, which causes hot spots. And if your feet aren't well taken care of or you don't have calluses in those spots, then you get blisters. And blisters are one of those things that can really destroy your trip. It can be a simple hot spot on day one that if you don't take care of it, by day 2, 3, 4, 5, you're going to have a big, either massive blister that makes it hard to put on your footwear, or you're going to have a big open wound, which can not only just be incredibly painful, but also get infected. So we need to be mindful of how to manage that. So the very first thing we have to do is get footwear that we like and fits and is comfortable no matter what anyone says. Get what works for you. Don't get what's cool or what is on sale. I know it's hard not to. We have to be mindful of budgets, but ultimately it's about what feels best on your feet because you're going to be living in these shoes. The next thing we have to look at then is what goes into the shoe. So assuming you got a shoe that fits, and I'll come back to this a little bit later too. But let's look at socks. So socks are one of those things that, I mean, you can spend a lot or you can spend a little on. My personal favorite is always a wool sock. So this is a pair of Darn Tough socks that I've had for years. And I love Darn Toughs, the Darn Tough hikers, because they are medium thickness. They are very tight around the cuff, mid-height cuff. They've got that cinching around the arch, which stops the sock from slipping. And that's really important. We want the socks to not slip around on our feet, because otherwise we get friction. So they need to be form-fitting. And the Darn Toughs are great because not only are they well constructed, but they have a lifetime guarantee. Like Osprey packs, I like to go with the ones that give me the guarantee so that if they wear out, they'll replace them or repair them. And I prefer repair when possible. And you can see in a few spots, I don't know if you can see this, but I have worn them threadbare on the outside of the pinky toe and just under my big toe. But these are a good quality pair of wool socks. And there's lots of great brands. I have icebreakers. I have a bunch of brands from all over the place. And I always go wool. Wool because it's slipperier than cotton. Synthetics work well too. But wool and synthetics are more slippery, meaning less friction, less chance of causing blisters, but they also do a really great job of wicking moisture and not smelling so bad. Synthetics will stink. So make sure you have a pair of form-fitted socks. More cushion means less pressure spots, and it means less friction, generally speaking, so a thicker sock. But a thicker sock is a hotter sock, so you have to be mindful. So I wear these almost year-round, but in the really hot parts of summer, I'll wear a pair of sort of lightweight hikers by Icebreaker. So those are really good. Now this is actually a pair of Darn Tough, like casual socks, and these are kind of more like a dress sock, but it's an all merino wool sock. Something thin like this is going to not wear as nicely. It will wear out quicker, but you can also use a double layer of these instead of a thicker sock. So that brings me to liners. So while we're talking about socks, one common solution to blisters is a liner sock. And so I have these wonderful rubber duck mismatched dress socks, and these are a synthetic dress sock. Something thin and synthetic works really well as a lightweight layer that you put over your foot before putting a thicker layer sock over the top. And that sock liner means that the form-fitting under sock clings to the foot well. The thicker hiking sock or whatever outside sock you want to use will then do its rubbing against the liner as opposed to your foot. So if you're prone to blisters, you don't have to buy super fancy hiking liner socks. They're usually just thin synthetics anyway. You can get neoprene ones, you can get spandex ones, or you can just get cheap dollar store dress socks and give that a go. So I'd look at doing something like that if you're blister prone. Alternatively, go for a thicker sock. That works well too. Now, one of the questions I also get is, well, what about toe socks? So toe socks, I think the only ones I know of are in Gingies, and they have a little pocket for each toe. And now that's only going to provide benefit. I don't think they're fully wool. I think they're primarily a synthetic blend. But that will only provide benefit on reducing friction between the toes. So if you're prone to blisters between the toes, that might be a really good option for you. Now, thick socks, thin socks, layers, liners, and toe socks. Those are your main things you can work with when dealing with blister prevention for socks, or what socks you would choose for blister prevention. Other things that we'll look at is if you've got a hot spot already, you're feeling a little wear on one area of your foot, whether it's the heel or on the back of your Achilles tendon or your big toe. As soon as you've already got a hot spot, that can be managed with things like tape. And so I've got just some different types of what we call rigid strapping tape. This is your sports tape. And this stuff works great. This is more of a paper tape. I wouldn't recommend something like this unless it's all you have, but the rigid strapping tapes designed for sports and athletic purposes are going to be a really good option for blister prevention, and it's just a general bandage. So what I do is I take a trekking pole, normal trekking pole, and I keep a few wraps of athletic tape around the shaft, just below the handle, and a few wraps of duct tape. Now, a few people, we call it gaffer tape in Australia, a few people will comment that, hey, duct tape works just as well. I'd say no. Duct tape does tend to get sticky and doesn't deal well with moisture, and then will lose its grip. Whereas this stuff is cloth, and it does tend to ventilate a little bit, and is designed to work in sporting applications, so it deals a little bit better with the sweat on the adhesive. But as soon as you get a hot spot, put something over it. Take your shoes off, stop hiking, take your socks off, dry your feet, and we'll come back to why dry feet are so important, and put a bit of tape over it. And it can be something like rigid athletic tape, which is, available in these giant spools, or some people will use special blister pads, little gel pads. They're usually like a little donut, and the hole inside goes where the blister is, and then you have the pad around it to take pressure off the blister, especially if you get less of a friction blister and more of a pressure blister because it's been pushing into the side of your shoe. Otherwise, moleskin. Moleskin is a sort of soft, how can I say it? It's kind of like a felt bandage almost, and you usually cut off little chunks of that and you put that on the hot spot as well. So manage your hot spots early, manage them often, take care of them, because again, blisters, once they form, are really hard to deal with on the trail. So tapes, socks are great for blister prevention. The other thing that you might see is things like hiker's wool and certain creams. Now, hiker's wool is not super common in North America, but here in Australia and in New Zealand, it's very common. And it's literally just a bag of sheep's wool, fluffy, loose sheep's wool. And what you do is if you're prone to areas of blistering or hot spots, or you get one on the trail, you pull out a little bit of this wool, and say if it's on the toe, you wrap it around, and it creates a cushion. It actually kind of felts as you walk, and that makes it a little bit more secure and manages moisture as well. You can also pack it in the sock, or you probably don't need to pack it outside the sock, in between the sock and the shoe, because it will move. But if you pack it in the sock, especially around the heel and the Achilles tendon when you get hot spots or if you're prone to blisters, that can do a lot to prevent that friction there and create a bit of padding. Creams work on the concept of maintaining a oily or waxy membrane that our body produces naturally on the skin and reducing friction that way. And so it's very similar to a lot of anti-chafing products that you get if you're a runner, where you put that on and it allows the fabric or the skin to glide along itself. For hiking, they tend to be a little bit thicker and waxier, and that allows them to last a little longer. That brings me to foot care. So the most important thing you can do at the end of each day is maintain healthy feet. If you are dealing with a lot of moisture, whether it's you're sweating out your boots, or it's ingress of water from walking through swampy mud, or rain dripping down your rain pants into your boots, you have to maintain healthy feet. So we naturally have a waxy, oily coating on our skin called sebum. And if you have a lot of moisture and you're rubbing it with your socks, you're washing that off. And that protective layer is one of the best things we have to keep our feet healthy from cracking and blistering and preventing infection. So one of the best things you can do at the end of a day is, if you have really wet feet or just really sweaty feet, take your feet out of your shoes, even if it's freezing. Do this while you're still warm. Take your feet out of your shoes, take that sock off, let those socks dry, and then if you can, wash your feet. If you can't, at least wipe them down and dry them, and then apply a waxy balm. So I usually use a hand balm, and it's got a little bit of like lemon oil and lavender, so my feet smell nice, and those have antibacterial properties as well. So if you have a clean, dry foot after you've taken out your boot, cleaned it off, dried it off, apply a bunch of some sort of waxy balm, like a hand balm, all over your feet. And then, if you have them, take your camp socks or another pair of clean, dry socks that are now going to be your foot recovery socks, put those over your waxy feet, and then if you have camp shoes, put those on and wear that while your hiking socks dry out. Now, if you want to save weight, say you're hiking around in big old boots and you don't want to carry another pair of lighter shoes for camp wear, whether it's sandals or Crocs, those work pretty well. One of my go-to methods is bread bags. Now, bread bags are nothing fancy. They're literally bread bags. You buy a loaf of bread from the shops, you have a thin, clear bag, save those. I always have a pile of them in my backpacking gear. Take a bread bag. Take your greasy foot with its clean, dry socks on, take a bread bag, put them over, and then you can put them back into your normal footwear. What this does is it creates heat that allows your day footwear to dry out while keeping your foot both dry, because that's a non-permeable membrane. That plastic bag will not let moisture in or out. So even if it's wet out and your feet or your shoes are wet, you can put the bread bags on and they're going to have dry feet. So put the bread bags on, put your feet back in your shoes, and that heat will help them dry while you're pottering around camp. Don't do up the laces, keep them real loose. And that will also keep your foot toasty and allow that waxy balm to melt into the skin. And then if they're really wet, if your shoes are really, really wet and you're having a hard time drying them at night, make sure you pull your insoles off, pop them somewhere where they can dry out, and then put your bread bag foot in the shoe. That's probably the best thing you can do to maintain foot health across multiple days. Have a routine around really caring for your feet. If you are in a really wet climate, say you're in the tropics, you're doing Kokoda Trail, you should have a pair of socks that you swap into at lunch. So you have morning socks and you have afternoon socks. You might have to bring more socks, but socks are lighter than boots or shoes. So 2 socks, and so the socks you wore in the morning, you throw them on your backpack to air out while you wear your next pair in the afternoon, and then when you get to camp in the evening, you go full clean, wax them up, throw them on bread bags, pop them back in your shoes, insoles are out drying, and then all of your hiking socks are drying out in your tent or near a heat source without catching them on fire. And then that way you've always got dry socks on your feet and well cared for skin that is less likely to blister or tear or crack or fall apart. So those are the systems that I use most of the time when it comes to backpacking foot care. Because I don't often wear leather or waterproof boots on the trail, I wear something like this. And these are a pair of Salomons, which are apparently full of sand. These will dry out while I'm kicking around camp, as long as it's not actively raining and I'm not walking through the mud. These will dry out pretty well by morning. And then I'll have ideally some dry socks, but even damp socks in the morning warm up pretty quick, but my feet will be healthy and can deal with that. So always care for your feet. Now there is an instance in which things get more complex. So when we are selecting our footwear, not everyone's feet are going to fit a standard boot well. I have fat paddle-shaped feet, and one question I get asked about is, what happens if you have bunions? That's tough. That doesn't make this easy. Where you have a bunion, you will always have that extra pressure. Now, there are a few things you can do. Ideally, you will source footwear, a boot or whatever it is, in the widest possible toe box. These are a pair of Anatoms, and this is a 4E, I think it is. Anyway, it's the widest ones I could get, and they were still not wide enough for my feet. I don't have a bunion, I just have fat feet. And you see how they come to a point. Well, if you have a bunion, it's going to be pushing out into this. So some companies do make bunion-friendly footwear. Some of the European hiking boots, I want to say either Lova or Hanvags, and these are Hanvags here, have a bunion-friendly last. And last is the shape of the boot. It's the mold they use to shape a footwear of some sort. So if you can find that, great. If you can't and you have leather boots, you can sometimes get something similar to a shoe tree that has sort of a bunion outcropping on it, and you get the leather, if it's a leather boot, you get the leather wet and then you heat it up and you use that bunion shoe tree system to push out and expand that area of the boot. It only works with leather though, because leather is moldable. And if you don't have a shoe tree that allows you to do that, you can just take something like a golf ball, or you just get in there with your knuckle and push that out on the boot as it's warm, as it's wet, and mold it, and then let it dry. That's a bit complex, and you have a good chance of messing up your boot. The other option is to get some sort of natural footbed boot. So I'm wearing a pair of Lems here. These are my go-to boots for everyday hiking, camping, hunting, that kind of thing in the winter. In the summer, I'll wear, what are they? They're Altras, which have a natural footbed too. And as you can see, yeah, look at the shape of this boot, and then look at the shape of this boot. Notice how there is a much wider forefoot section here that allows for a straight and natural big toe. Because a bunion is when that big toe tilts in and that toe knuckle is pushing out. And that isn't something people are born with. That's something that happens from bad footwear over their lifetime, especially if they wear dress shoes a lot. And that ultimately is something that has to be fixed through surgery in most cases. There are a few other cases, but something like this is a pair of Lems boots or Altras or Vivo Barefoot, or what's another one? Zero, Xero. There's a bunch of brands that have that natural wide toe box, because that's how our feet are designed. Feet don't look like this. And so if you have a bunion, you need the widest forefoot possible. So look for a brand that has that natural wide toe box. Try those and get something that is wide enough for that forefoot where your bunion is. If that doesn't work, try a standard boot or shoe in the widest fit. You might have to go bigger than normal. See how that works. If that doesn't work, and you can get a leather boot, try and mold out that section. You might even be able to get a cobbler to do that for you. If that doesn't work, go really lightweight and synthetic. Materials like this aren't as rigid and won't push as hard. And if you can go lightweight, synthetic, and natural toe box, you're probably winning. You'll have a hard time though if you need more ankle support. The Lems that I'm wearing here do come in a synthetic, sort of a canvasy material, which might be a good option. They do have a waterproof lining, which I talked about in the previous video. Other than that, padding out and around the bunion might work. And then, because you have that extra bit of pressure in one spot on your foot, make sure you're taking every possible precaution to maintain good foot health, especially on swampy, tropical, wet trails. So when we're dealing with blisters, let's look through our order of operations again. Footwear first. That's key. Find something that is perfect for you, even if it's not the coolest thing out there. Play with your sock systems. Test those out first. That's going to be the basis of your foot health. Then look at therapeutic options, things like tapes, hiker's wool, balms and creams, and things you apply when you have a hot spot already or are trying to manage a blister. Then look at how you care for your feet each day. whether that's rotating socks, whether that's how you clean and dry your feet at night, whether you're using the bread bag system or you have a more ventilated footwear like a pair of slide-on sandals, like what I use when guiding, or a pair of Crocs. Think about what's going to be best for you and test them. I don't have the answers for you. I have options. So take those options, see what's going to work well for you, layer them, play with them. If one system doesn't work, try another system. If that doesn't work, mix and match. But ultimately, making sure you have healthy, blister-free feet when you are hiking is going to be key to a long, healthy, happy hiking life. And if you got any questions, hit me up.